The space station hung in the silent dark, a lonely jewel of metal and light. Inside, the air was cool and clean, but it felt heavy with worry. This was the first time humans had met beings from another star. The humans were new to the galaxy, and the other races thought they were too young, too wild, and not important. G-Ho stood in the grand meeting room, his heart beating fast. He was a young man with kind eyes and messy black hair. His job was to help talk to the aliens. He was a linguist, which meant he studied languages. He wanted to show the galaxy that humans were smart and good, not just noisy newcomers. But right now, his hands were sweaty and his mouth felt dry. Across the long, smooth table sat the alien diplomat. Her name was Dayun. She was from a people called the Velnari. Her skin was not like human skin. It was smooth and hard, like pale, clear crystal. It shimmered softly with its own light. Her eyes were large and deep, the color of a calm ocean. She sat perfectly still, her back straight, her face showing no emotion. To the other aliens in the room, she looked calm and in control. But Jiho, watching her closely, saw a tiny flicker of light deep inside her chest. Like a hidden star, the head of the human team, a man named Minjae, began to speak. His voice was strong and clear. He talked about peace and friendship between their peoples. A machine next to him translated his words into the complex musical language of the Volnari. Then it was Jiho's turn. He was supposed to greet Dayun with a formal title, a word that showed great respect. He had practiced it 100 times. But as he looked at her, at the strange beauty of her crystalline form, his mind went blank. The word he needed vanished. All he could think was how lovely she looked. It was a simple human word, full of warmth, not cold respect. He opened his mouth, and the wrong word came out. Lovely, he said, his voice a little shaky. The room became completely silent. The soft hum of the station's machines seemed to stop. The other human diplomats froze, their faces pale with shock. The Volnari advisors behind Dayun shifted in their seats, their own crystalline skins flashing with sharp, angry red light. It was a huge mistake. In their culture, calling someone lovely was not a polite greeting. It was a very personal, even intimate thing to say. It was something you would only say to someone you cared for deeply, not to a stranger in a formal meeting. Jiho's face turned bright red. He wanted to disappear. He had ruined everything. He had made humanity look foolish and rude. But then, something unexpected happened. Dayun, the perfect, emotionless diplomat, moved. A soft, warm pink light began to glow from within her cheeks, spreading down her neck. It was a blush, but made of light. Her large, ocean-colored eyes looked directly at Jiho, wide with surprise and something else, something tender. The silence stretched on, thick and tense. Then, in a voice that was quiet and clear, like a bell ringing in a quiet garden, she spoke. She did not use the translation machine. She spoke directly to him in simple, basic English, the words sounding careful and new on her tongue. "Say it again, human," she whispered. Jiho was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. He looked at his boss, Minjae, who was staring at him with a mixture of horror and confusion. He looked at the other Velnari, who were now glowing with a confused, pulsing blue light. But his eyes were drawn back to Dayun. Her light blush was still there, a soft, persistent glow. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. He didn't understand what was happening, but he saw a strange hope in her eyes. So, he took a breath and spoke the word again, this time with more certainty. Lovely. The pink light in Dayun's face grew brighter for a moment, then settled into a gentle, steady warmth. A small, almost invisible smile touched the corners of her crystalline lips. She gave a single, slow nod. The meeting ended soon after, in a hurry and with many hushed, worried conversations. Jiho was pulled aside by his superiors and scolded for his terrible error in protocol. He was told he might be sent home in disgrace. He walked back to his small quarters, feeling like the weight of his entire species was on his shoulders. But he couldn't forget the way Dayun had looked at him. He couldn't forget the soft light in her face or the quiet request in her voice. It hadn't felt like an insult to her. It had felt like a gift. He didn't know what it meant, but for the first time since arriving on the station, he felt a spark of real connection. He had been trying so hard to speak their perfect formal language, but maybe, just maybe, the simple, honest word from his own heart was the one that truly mattered. He sat on his bed, looking out at the stars, wondering what would happen next, and hoping he would see the lovely, blushing alien girl again. The space station felt colder after the meeting. The mistake Jiho had made hung in the air like a bad smell. He was called to his supervisor's office, a small, plain room with metal walls. Minjae sat behind a desk, his face serious. "Jiho," he said, his voice low and tight. "You know how important this is. We are guests here. We must follow their rules." That word you used. It was not just wrong. It was deeply offensive. You have made us look like children who don't know how to behave. Jiho kept his eyes on the floor. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident. I meant no disrespect. An accident that could cost us everything," Minjae replied. "The Valnari are already suspicious of us. They think we are too emotional, too chaotic. Your outburst proved their point. You are to stay in your quarters until further notice. No more contact with the diplomats." Jiho nodded, his heart heavy. He walked back to his room, feeling like a failure. He had wanted to help, and instead, he had hurt his own people. Far away, in the elegant, quiet wing of the station reserved for the Valnari, Dayun was also in trouble. She stood before her own leader, Elder Kale. His crystalline form was tall and sharp, his inner light a cold, steady blue. "Dayun," he said, his voice like ice cracking. "Your reaction was a public display of weakness. In our history, such open emotion has led only to chaos and pain. We left that behind centuries ago. You are a diplomat, not a poet. You must be a perfect example of our control and logic." "I understand, Elder Kale," Dayun said, her voice calm. But the soft pink glow in her chest refused to fade completely. "You will have no more contact with the human." "Jiho," the elder commanded. "This incident is closed. You will forget his words." But Dayun could not forget. The word "lovely" echoed in her mind. It was a word from a forgotten time, a time before her people had locked away their hearts to become strong. It felt warm and strange, like sunlight on stone. She had spent her whole life following the rules, speaking in perfect, empty phrases. But that one simple, human word had touched something deep inside her, something she didn't even know was there. Days passed. Jiho stayed in his room, reading reports and staring at the stars. He missed the work, but more than that, he missed the chance to talk to Dayun. He wondered what she was thinking. He hoped she wasn't in too much trouble because of him. One evening, as he was about to go to sleep, a soft chime sounded at his door. He opened it to find a small, silent service drone. It held a data chip in its claw. There was no name on it, but Jiho's heart jumped. He took the chip and inserted it into his terminal. A message appeared on the screen. It was from Dayun. Her words were simple, written in careful English. Asterisk human Jiho. Asterisk asterisk I am sorry for your trouble. My people are also angry with me, but I cannot forget your word. It was not an insult to me. It was a gift. I would like to understand it. If you are willing, meet me at the old observation deck, Sector 7G, tomorrow at the third bell. Come alone. Asterisk. Jiho read the message over and over. It was a huge risk. He was forbidden to see her. If he was caught, he would be sent home for sure. But he looked at her words again. It was a gift. He knew he had to go. The next day, he found a way to slip past the security patrols. Sector 7G was an old part of the station, rarely used. The observation deck was a large, curved window looking out into the endless black. The stars were bright and clear. Dayun was already there, standing by the window. She turned as he entered. Her crystalline skin glowed with that same soft pink light. "You came," she said, her voice a whisper. "I had to," Jiho replied. "Are you in trouble?" She nodded slowly. "My people believe feelings are a flaw. They think they make us weak. For a long time, I believed them too. But when you said that word, I felt something I have never felt before. It was not weakness. It felt strong, like a new kind of strength." Jiho smiled a little. "In my culture, we believe feelings are what make us human. Love, kindness, even sadness, they're all part of life. They connect us to each other." "Connect," Dayun repeated, tasting the word. "That is a good word, too." They talked for a long time. Jiho told her about his home on Earth, about the green trees and the blue oceans, about families and friends who care for each other. Dayun listened, her eyes wide with wonder. She told him about her world, a place of silent cities and perfect order, where everyone followed the rules and no one ever cried or laughed too loudly. "It sounds lonely," Jiho said gently. Dayun was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It is. I did not know it was lonely until now." Their secret meetings became a regular thing. They would meet in quiet corners of the station, always careful, always watching for guards. Jiho taught her simple human words for feelings: happy, sad, brave, kind. Dayun, in turn, showed him how her people saw the universe, not as a place of stories, but as a great, complex machine to be understood and controlled. One day, as they sat together in a disused storage bay, Dayun asked, "Why did you call me lovely? You did not know me." Jiho thought for a moment. "I don't know. You just looked that way. Your light was so soft and beautiful. It reminded me of the first light of morning on a quiet lake. It just felt true." Dayun's blush returned, brighter than ever. She reached out a hand, her crystalline fingers almost touching his. "Thank you, Jiho," she said. "You are teaching me to see the world in a new way." Their friendship was a tiny, fragile thing, growing in the shadows of a vast and uncaring galaxy. But in that small space between them, something new was being born, a bridge between two worlds, built not on treaties or technology, but on a single, simple, misunderstood word. And for both of them, it was the most important thing in the universe. The space station was a maze of metal halls and quiet rooms, but for Jiho and Dayun, it had become a place of secret wonder. Their meetings were their own small world, hidden from the watchful eyes of their superiors. They met in forgotten corners, a dusty archive filled with old human books, a quiet garden where Velnari diplomats practiced silent meditation, even a small observation blister that looked out at the swirling colors of a nearby nebula. G-Ho brought her things to show her what humans valued. He showed her a simple painting of a field of flowers, explaining how humans used art to capture beauty. He played her a piece of music, a soft piano melody, and watched as the light inside her pulsed gently in time with the notes. He told her stories about his grandmother, about how she would make him soup when he was sick, and tell him tales of brave heroes and kind animals. Dayun listened with a deep, quiet focus. She had never heard of such things. In her world, stories were data logs, and music was precise mathematical patterns. The idea that someone would create something just because it was beautiful, or tell a story just to share a feeling, was completely new to her. "It is not logical," she said one day, holding a small, smooth stone Jiho had given her from a river on Earth. but it feels right. In return, Dae-yoon began to share her own hidden thoughts. She told Jiho about the weight of her people's silence, about how they had once been full of song and passion, but after a great war long ago, they decided that emotion was too dangerous. They built a society of perfect order, where every action was planned and every word was measured. But in doing so, they had lost something precious. "We are safe," she said, her voice low, "but we are not alive in the way you are." Their friendship grew deeper with each meeting. They were no longer just a human and an alien. They were two lonely souls finding a connection in a vast, cold universe. Jiho found himself looking forward to their time together more than anything else. Dae-yoon's soft, glowing blush became a familiar and comforting sight. Then, the crisis came. It started with a sudden, violent shudder that ran through the entire station. The lights flickered and died for a moment, replaced by the harsh red glow of emergency beacons. An alarm blared, a sharp, urgent sound that cut through the usual quiet hum. Jiho was in his quarters when it happened. He rushed into the hall, joining a stream of panicked humans and confused aliens. A voice over the intercom announced that a power surge in the lower maintenance levels had caused a fire in a sealed section, Sector 9. The fire was spreading fast, and the automatic doors had locked to contain it. But there was a problem. A group of young Velnari, children of the diplomatic staff, had been in the learning pod in that sector. They were trapped. The station's emergency teams were already on the move, but they were following strict protocol. The fire was too dangerous. The plan was to seal the entire sector and let the fire burn itself out. The lives of a few young ones were, in the cold logic of the Concord, an acceptable loss to save the whole station. Jiho heard this and felt a cold dread in his stomach. He thought of Dae-yoon's stories about her people's lost emotions. He thought of the young Velnari, alone and scared in the dark. He didn't think. He just ran. He knew the station layout well. He grabbed a fire-resistant suit from a nearby locker and headed straight for Sector 9. He wasn't alone. Two other humans, a woman named Su-min and a man named Min-jae, the same Min-jae, who had scolded him before, were also running with him. They had the same thought. They couldn't just leave those children to die. The heat in Sector 9 was intense. Smoke filled the air, stinging their eyes. The emergency doors were locked, but Min-jae, who was an engineer, knew how to override the system. They forced their way in, calling out into the smoke. They found the learning pod. Inside, huddled together, were 5 young Velnari. Their crystalline forms were dull with fear, their inner lights flickering weakly. They were too scared to move. "It's okay," Jiho said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're here to help you." He and Su-min carefully picked up the smallest ones, while Min-jae guided the older ones. They moved quickly but carefully back through the burning corridor, shielding the children from the worst of the heat and smoke. It was dangerous and messy, a complete break from the clean, logical plans of the station's command. But they did it. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Among them was Dae-yoon. She had heard the news and come running, her heart filled with a terror she had never known before. She saw the sealed door, and she thought she had lost them. Then the door opened, and Jiho emerged, carrying a small, trembling Velnari child in his arms. Su-min and Min-jae followed with the others. The children were safe. Dae-yoon's breath caught in her throat. She saw the soot on Jiho's face, the exhaustion in his eyes, but also the fierce, gentle care with which he held the child. This was not logic. This was not protocol. This was pure, selfless courage. This was the heart of the word he had given her. She pushed through the crowd and ran to him. Without thinking, without caring who was watching, she reached out and touched his arm. Her light was blazing now, not just a blush, but a full, warm, golden glow that radiated from her entire being. "You saved them," she whispered, Her voice full of awe. Jiho looked at her, tired but smiling. Of course, he said simply. They needed help. In that moment, standing in the smoky hallway, surrounded by the chaos they had just faced, Dayun finally understood. Humanity's so-called weakness, their messy, powerful emotions, was actually their greatest strength. It was the source of their bravery, their kindness, and their love. It was the very thing that made them, in her eyes, truly lovely. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never see her own people or the galaxy in the same way again. The rescue in Sector 9 should have been a moment of celebration. The children were safe, the fire was out, and the humans had shown great courage. But on the space station, it only made things worse. A powerful group within the Galactic Concord, led by a stern Cathari ambassador named Vrax, saw the event as proof of everything they feared about humanity. They called an emergency session of the Grand Conclave, the council that governed all member species. The humans were summoned to stand before them. The Grand Conclave chamber was a vast, circular room. Its walls were made of polished black stone that seemed to drink the light. High above, representatives from dozens of alien species sat in tiered seats, their faces unreadable masks of judgment. At the center of the floor stood Jiho, Minjae, and the head of the human delegation. They were small and alone, and the huge space ambassador Vrax rose from his seat. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. This incident proves our point, he declared. The humans are chaotic. They act on wild feelings, not reason. They broke safety protocols, risking the entire station for a few lives. This is not bravery. It is recklessness. A species that cannot control its emotions is a danger to the peace and order of the galaxy. He turned his sharp, insect-like eyes on the humans. We move to quarantine Earth and its colonies. They will be cut off from galactic trade, travel, and communication. They are not ready for the responsibilities of membership. They are a child playing with fire. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many of the other species nodded. The humans looked at each other in despair. Their one chance to join the galaxy was slipping away, all because they had chosen to save lives. Jiho felt a knot of fear in his stomach. He thought of Dayun, of their secret talks, of the trust she had placed in him. He had failed. He had not only failed his people, but he had also let her down. He looked up at the high seats, searching for her, but he could not see her among the Volnari diplomats. His heart sank back in the Volnari wing. Dayun was in her quarters. She had watched the session on a private screen. She heard Vrax's words, and she saw the hope drain from Jiho's face. A fierce anger, a feeling she had been taught to suppress her whole life, burned inside her. It was not a chaotic anger, but a clear, sharp one. She remembered Jiho's words. They needed help. She remembered the warmth of his hand as he held the child. She remembered the word lovely, and all the meaning it now held for her. Her people's elder Kale entered her room. "Dayun," he said, his voice heavy with warning. "Do not speak. Do not interfere. This is not our affair. Let the humans face the consequences of their nature." "My nature is changing, Elder," Dayun replied, her inner light steady and strong. "And I will not be silent." Before he could stop her, she walked out of her quarters and toward the Grand Conclave chamber. Her steps were calm, but her heart was racing with a new kind of courage. In the chamber, the vote was about to be called. The human leader was pleading for another chance, but his words were falling on deaf ears. Just as the presiding judge raised his hand to call for the vote, a single figure walked onto the central floor. It was Dayun. A gasp went through the chamber. A Volnari diplomat, especially one so young, never interrupted a formal session. Elder Kale, watching from the Volnari seats, closed his eyes in shame. Dayun stood tall, facing the entire conclave. She did not look afraid. She looked determined. Honored members of the conclave, she began, her voice clear and ringing. You speak of humanity's weakness. You call their emotions a flaw. But you are wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. I have spent time with them. I have learned from them. I saw them run into a burning fire, not for glory, but to save children they did not even know. They did not calculate the risk. They did not follow a plan. They simply saw a need, and they acted with kindness. She turned to look directly at Ambassador Vrax. You call this chaos. I call it compassion. You call it weakness. I call it the strongest force in the universe. Then she told them the story of the word. She told them how a simple human word, spoken by mistake, had awakened a part of her soul that her own culture had buried for centuries. She spoke of the music, the stories, the quiet acts of care that defined humanity. Our galaxy is old and wise, she said, her voice softening, but it has forgotten how to feel. We have built a perfect machine, but we have lost the heart that makes it worth running. Humanity is not a threat to our order. They are a gift to our spirit. They remind us that logic without love is just an empty shell. She looked at Jiho, who was staring at her with wide, hopeful eyes. Do not shut them out. Open your hearts to them. Let their weakness teach us how to be truly strong again. Silence filled the chamber. It was a deeper silence than before, not of judgment, but of thought. Many of the alien representatives looked at each other, their expressions no longer certain. The image of humans rushing into a fire to save children and a vulnerary diplomat speaking of a forgotten heart had shaken their cold logic. The presiding judge looked at the assembly. The motion for quarantine is before us, he said slowly. All in favor? Only a few hands rose. Vrax's and his closest allies. Those opposed? One by one, hands began to rise. First from the smaller, younger species, then from some of the older ones. The vote was not unanimous, but it was clear. The motion failed. Humanity would not be quarantined. They would be given a chance. Dayun walked back to her seat, her light glowing with a quiet, steady joy. She had risked everything, her position, her people's respect, her entire future. But as she looked at Jiho, who gave her a small, grateful nod, she knew it was worth it. She had not just saved humanity's place in the galaxy. She had begun to heal her own. The space station was no longer a place of tension and fear. The air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. News of the conclave's decision had spread quickly. Humans walked the halls with their heads held a little higher, and some of the other species even offered them quiet nods of respect. The galaxy had given them a chance, and they were determined not to waste it. Jiho stood at the large observation window in the central hub, looking out at the stars. His reflection in the glass showed a young man who looked tired but peaceful. The frantic worry that had been his constant companion since arriving was gone. In its place was a quiet pride. He had not just represented his people. He had shown them at their best. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned. Dayun was there. She walked toward him, her crystalline form glowing with a soft, warm light that seemed to come from deep within. She no longer tried to hide it. Her blush was now a part of her, a symbol of her new self. You did it, Jiho said with a smile. We did it, she corrected gently. Your people showed their heart, and I just gave them a voice. They stood side by side, watching the endless dance of stars and distant ships. The silence between them was comfortable, full of everything they didn't need to say. It's strange, Dayun said after a while. My people are already sending messages home. They're asking questions. They want to know about your music, your stories, your feelings. The elders are confused, but they cannot stop it. A door has been opened, and it will not close. Jiho nodded. It's the same for us. We used to think we had to be perfect to be accepted, smart, strong, serious. But we learned that our kindness is our strength. We don't have to hide who we are. A small service drone floated past, carrying a tray of drinks. It paused near them, offering 2 cups of a steaming, fragrant tea human blend that had become popular among the station's staff. Jiho took one and handed it to Daeyoon. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his for a moment. The simple act of sharing a drink felt like a promise. Their journey was far from over. There would be more meetings, more treaties to sign, more misunderstandings to clear up. But the foundation had been laid. It was not built on technology or power, but on a single, honest word spoken by mistake and a courageous act of compassion in a burning hallway dot as they sipped their tea. A group of young Valnari children walked by with their teacher. They saw Daeyoon and Jiho together and stopped. One of the bolder ones, a small girl with bright, curious eyes, stepped forward. "Are you the human who called her lovely?" The child asked Jiho, her voice clear and direct. Jiho chuckled softly. "I am." The child looked at Daeyoon, then back at Jiho. "Is it true that humans hug when they are happy?" Before Jiho could answer, Daeyoon knelt down to the child's level. "It is true," she said, her voice kind. "And it is a very nice thing." She then opened her arms slightly, and the child, after a moment of hesitation, stepped into a gentle, careful hug. The other children watched, their own inner lights flickering with a mix of surprise and wonder. Jiho watched the scene, his heart full. This was the future. Not grand battles or complex politics, but small moments of connection, of learning, of shared humanity, or in this case, shared life. Later, as the station's artificial sun began to set, casting long shadows across the deck, Jiho and Daeyoon prepared to go their separate ways for the night. Their official duties would keep them busy, but they both knew their secret meetings were no longer necessary. Their friendship was now a public bridge between their worlds. Daeyoon turned to him before she left. The soft pink blush was back in her cheeks, but it was steady and calm, no longer a sign of shock but of contentment. She looked at him for a long moment, her ocean-colored eyes full of warmth. "You know, Jiho," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you are also lovely." Jiho felt a smile spread across his face. He didn't blush, he couldn't, but he felt the warmth of her words all the same. "Thank you, Daeyoon," he replied. She gave him a small, genuine smile, the first real one he had ever seen on her crystalline face, and then walked away, her light leaving a gentle trail in the dimming corridor. Jiho stayed by the window for a long time. He thought about his home planet, so far away, and all the people there who had no idea what was happening. He thought about the vast, cold galaxy, and how it was slowly, quietly, becoming a little warmer because of them. Humanity's greatest gift to the stars would not be its ships that flew faster than light, or its machines that could build whole cities. It would be its heart, its ability to care, to feel, to call someone lovely just because they were. And in that simple, beautiful truth, the future of 1,000 worlds would find its hope.